Hello and welcome to the podcast, Jack of all trades, master of none. Today we're going to be talking about GMOs and plant breeding. Starting out strong, I'm going to have a couple of definitions. First, I'm going to define plant breeding, and this is the definition from the National Association for Plant Breeding. The technical definition given by the association is plant breeding is the science-driven creative process of developing new plant varieties that goes by various names including cultivar development, crop improvement, and seed improvement. Breeding involves the creation of multi-generation, genetically diverse populations on which human selection is practiced to create adapted plants with new combinations of specific desirable traits. The selection process is driven by biological assessment in relevant target environments and knowledge of genes and genomes. Progress is assessed based on gain under selection, which is a function of genetic variation, selection, intensity, and time. Now we're going to talk about GMOs. So GMO stands for genetically modified organism. The Federal Food and Drug Association defines a GMO is a plant, animal, or microorganism that has had its genetic material, DNA, changed using technology that generally involves the specific modification of DNA, including the transfer of specific DNA from one organism to another. Right off the bat, I would like to make it specifically known that I am not saying that plant breeding and GMOs are the same thing. They are not. But they are in the same vein. You know what I mean? Like, they're both done for the improvement of crop yields. They are both affecting the genetic components of the plants, but like, it's genetic modifications is like they are going in and like taking things out of the DNA sequence or adding things in or switching things out. They are changing the DNA of that plant. Selective breeding is like using how do I describe this? Let's say you want bigger carrots, okay? So you plant a bunch of carrots, right? And so you dig them up and you're like, okay, you take the biggest carrots and you only use the seeds from the biggest carrots, right? And then you do that again. You plant the seeds of the biggest carrots. You let them grow. Do the same thing. You take the carrots up, see which ones are the biggest. Same thing over and over and over again. And over a course of generations, you will get bigger carrots because you're only letting the bigger carrot genes carry on. Does that make sense? I feel like that's the best way I can describe it. But GMOs is like if you wanted bigger carrots, and so you were like, I'm going to go into its DNA and I'm going to put the grow gene in there, or I'm going to take away whatever gene limits carrot growth and like reduce it or whatever. Like you are using human technology to go in and like alter DNA. Like completely change the DNA of that organism. That's the difference. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the best I can explain it. Yes, plant breeding is technically modifying or changing or manipulating genetics, but when it comes to GMOs in today's age, we're specifically talking about like technological, you're ripping out a piece of the ladder and sticking a new one in kind of genetic modification. Now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about some fruits and vegetables that you might not know were actually man-made using plant breeding. Number one, the banana, okay? I have beef with the banana, just a little bit. So the banana that everyone knows of and is eating every day, blah, 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 is called the Cavendish banana, or Cavendish, I don't know how to say it, but it's a specific type of banana, okay? And this banana is super duper 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 recent. This type of banana entered mass production in about 1903, but didn't actually become like a huge contender until about the 1950s, because the previous boss banana had a huge thing where it was something called the Panama disease, and it attacked the banana. It was called Big Mike, which is crazy name for a banana, by the way. So that disease attacked those bananas, making it like basically extinct, like really, really hard to grow, blah, blah, blah. So then the Cavendish banana swooped in and was like, I'm gonna take over. And it did, trust. It was 47% of the global banana production between 1998 and 2000. And current day, it accounts for about 99% of all banana exports to developed countries. And here's the thing, the Panama disease that destroyed the last banana also is a bad guy for the current banana, because that makes sense. And there is no like treatment effective against this disease. It's a fungi that infects the trees, and there's no fungicide that like works. And so the bananas are at risk. And you're like, tyranny, what if some of the bananas survive and they like develop genetic immunity and pass it down to their banana babies? The problem is that the modern banana cannot reproduce by itself. In fact, all of our bananas are genetically identical clones. Every banana is exactly the same as any other banana. And that, my friends, is why we are constantly on the verge of a banana extinction. So, get your potassium while you can. Good luck, everybody else. Now that we've got the banana business out of the way, I'm going to tell you something that you definitely might not have known, because I didn't know until relatively recently either. Cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, collard greens, Savoy cabbage, kohlrabi, and guylan. I don't know that last one, but they are all from the same plant. Brassica oleracea, otherwise known as the wild cabbage. Basically what happened was that this wild plant existed around the world, basically, and people would, garden them, and they wanted to have certain attributes of the plants, and in different places you got different veggies. So like ancient Greece and Rome is where we got kale, which is crazy. I think it's insane that people from different places prioritize different parts of a single plant and produce like 5 different leafy greens that we eat. Anyways, along those lines, corn. Hate to break it to you, but corn is just big ass grass. Like, corn is literally grass. Basically, corn was bred from a specific plant, and the Mayans and other Central American populations and Mexican populations bred it to that it would have a larger seed yield, and then it became corn. And the thing about corn is that there's like a billion different kinds of corn, which is all from one plant, which is Zea mexicana, which is the Latin name. Zea mexicana. I don't really know how to say the common name, ironically enough. So Another one, strawberries are technically a hybrid plant. So the modern strawberry that we all eat usually is known as the garden strawberry, and it was first bred in France. And it's a cross between the musky strawberry and the Chilean strawberry. And so that was like a pretty sick strawberry. Everyone loves it. Down the line, that hybrid was then bred with the Virginia strawberry, which kind of finalized the ability for the plant to grow in a lot of different places. This was all done in like the 1750s, and since then there's been individual hybrids, but like the mass produced one is the garden strawberry. Couple of fun facts about strawberries. In culinary terms, strawberries are edible fruit, not berries. And botanically speaking, they are an aggregate accessory fruit, which basically just means that the flesh that we eat itself is not a berry, because the seeds are on the outside and the fleshy part is just kind of there. It like exists to accompany the seeds. So it's not actually a berry. In addition to that, strawberries are actually part of the rose family. So roses and strawberries are related. So fun. Just gonna have a lightning round real quick where I just kind of list off a bunch of foods that were genetically bred, like selectively bred from a plant that you probably wouldn't even recognize today into the into the food that we recognize and eat daily. Starting out strong, oranges, grapefruit, apples, tomatoes. Also, tomatoes are part of the nightshade family. Watermelon, cucumbers, peanuts, orange carrots specifically were developed by the Dutch. Like, there were already orange carrots, they're multicolored carrots, but the Dutch were like, I only want orange carrots. And then also eggplants, weirdly enough. And several other. Most fruits and vegetables that we eat have been selectively bred to be the way they are today. And if not, they've definitely been genetically modified at some point. Now, this is the part of the episode where I'm like, fair warning, I am not super educated on the process of genetic modification in the modern scientific sense. I am much more familiar with selective breeding of plants, which is why I kind of focused on that during today's episode. But I would just like to clear up a couple things about GMOs, because I know some people are still scared of them, and that's reasonable. So straight from the FDA website, there's only so many plants grown in the US with GMOs in them. And number one, corn. We be growing so much corn. So most corn that is genetically modified in the US is genetically modified to resist insects, like pests, or to tolerate herbicides and other things that's used to help the corn grow. One such GMO corn produces a protein that is toxic to certain insects, so that it reduces the amount of insecticide that is used, but that same compound does not affect humans or pets or livestock or other animals that we would be worried about eating it. Another huge contender for GMO plants in the US, you guessed it, soybeans. Soybeans and corn are the top GMO plants. Most of those soybeans are being used to feed animals and or make soybean oil. So yeah, GMO cotton exists. It's genetically modified to resist bollworms and create a reliable source of cotton. Your potatoes are probably genetically modified. They were genetically modified to resist insects and disease, to help keep them from getting gross and bruised and nasty when they are getting packaged as well. Fun fact, pink pineapples are genetically modified pineapples. They increase the level of lycopene in the pineapples to make it have pink flesh. And lycopene is naturally found in pineapples. They were just like, what if we turned that to 100? And now they're pink. Crazy. Some other ones are papaya, summer squash, canola, alfalfa, apples, sugar beet, things like that. And GMOs are pretty regulated, especially in food. Like, food is one of the most, regulated things there are. Like, anyone who's taken a food safety course knows this. So if you feel nervous about eating GMO food, totally understandable. I don't really understand genetic modification, but because I know so much about selective breeding, I'm pretty okay with it. But if you're just nervous about it, I would highly recommend, looking up the specific modifications that they are, being like, hey, this corn is genetically modified. Let me look up, what are the genetic modifications of corn? You don't know. So you can look it up and you're like, oh, okay, it's genetically modified to produce a protein that reduces the amount of insecticide that needs to be used because the protein is bad for insects, but not bad for me. Cool. I feel like just understanding what's actually happening helps a lot of people. And again, if you don't want to eat GMOs, fine by me. But in my mind, if you don't want to eat GMOs, you're going to have a hard time eating literally any fruit. Because if you don't like any genetic modification at all, you can't have literally any of the stuff in the grocery store.